So you've set up your sheets, and now it's time to print. Revit can print to any output device you have connected to your computer or network. As we saw in a previous movie, DWF files offer outstanding results in a complete, compact, and data-rich digital plot. However, many firms and recipients still require a traditional paper plot. The steps required to use the print command in Revit are not much different than what's required to print from nearly any Windows software. In this movie, we'll go ahead and look at the procedure and step through the process and look at the print dialog and the print setup dialog. If you need to print a PDF file, all that's required is an appropriate PDF printer, and you use the exact same procedure that we're going to show here. Just choose your PDF printer instead of your hard copy print device, and the steps are nearly identical. So I'm in a file called plotting. It's in the exercise folder, and I have a few different sheets open on screen. I'll just go ahead and maximize up one of the sheets here. It doesn't really matter which sheets you have open. Go to the application menu, go to the print command, and we have 3 commands available in this window. We can go directly to print. We will get a chance to verify our settings in the print dialog, so that's certainly an option. We can do a print preview, which will give us an on-screen preview before we start. Or if we need to check our settings before we print, we can go look at the page setup. Again, it doesn't really matter whether you go directly to print or page setup, because if you choose print, you'll have the option down here to go to the setup dialog as well. So in both cases, you're going to want to take a look at what you have on screen and make sure that all the settings meet your needs before you actually click OK. So let's just kind of walk through the dialog. Naturally, yours will look slightly different than mine because whatever printers you have installed on your system will be listed here in the name list. So for now, I'm not going to pay too much attention to the actual printer I'm using. We'll just focus more on the steps required in the dialog here. So the first step certainly is to open up this list and choose whatever printer you desire to print to. That could include a hard copy printer, or it could include a PDF printer if you have one installed. If your printer has specific options associated with it, you can use the Properties button over here to access those options. If you want to print to a file, the options are listed here, like file name, and you can browse for that location. Print range. You have a few different options here. Current window is the default, and if I move this out of the way, that just simply means that in my case, I would get the building elevation sheet. Now, you can also do the visible portion of the current window. Now that you probably wouldn't use too often with a sheet file, although it's possible. It might be if you were actually in a view, like a floor plan or a section or an elevation, and you just wanted to print off a little area of that view, particularly to a laser printer or something like that to check your work. You could choose that option, and then whatever you're zoomed in on screen, that's what would be included in the print. If you're actually interested in producing a set of documents to share with an outside recipient, then chances are this is the setting you're going to want to choose right here. So you would click Select Views and Sheets, and then click the Select button, and that will give you a list of all the views and sheets that are in your project. So you can actually print the views directly, but in my opinion, you've gone to the trouble of setting up the sheets, you're really probably better off checking this box over here to exclude all the views from the list and focus your attention just on the sheets. These sheets have been presumably set up specifically for plotting, so that's probably the ones that you want to devote your attention to. You can use the Check All button and select all of the sheets to print, or if there was some sheet you wanted to exclude for whatever reason, you can exclude it there. If you want to print the same list of sheets more than once, you want to use it again in a future session, instead of going through this list and checking and unchecking the boxes each time, you can actually click Save As, and I could call this, some descriptive name, like in this case, maybe it's permit set. And then if for whatever reason I ever need to reprint my permit set, when I click OK, if I go back to select, I can just choose permit set off the list. And even though it's still showing me all the views and sheets, if I scroll through, you see how the only ones that are checked are the ones that were actually part of the permit set. So we'll go ahead and click OK. So that takes care of what we're printing. We do have some options. If you're printing to a paper plot, you could do reverse order and collate and so on to decide how those come out of the printing device. And then let's look at page setup. So if we click here, this window you would go directly to if on the application menu you chose page setup first. Because we went to the print command first, we're accessing it here, but either way it's the same dialog. Your printer again will be listed at the top, your page sizes. If you're using a full-size plotter, you'll obviously have many different page sizes here, including the full E size and D size and other architectural sizes. So make sure you've chosen the right paper size before you start. Make sure you've got the right orientation, probably landscape in most cases for architectural drawings. The default behavior is to center the plot on the piece of paper. If you know the calibration of your plotter and that you need a certain offset or a certain margin or what have you, then you can choose here to use the printer's limit, or you can do a user-defined limit or no margin. If you use a user-defined, you can actually come in here in these X and Y fields and type in an exact offset from the corner of the page. So you'll have to do some experimenting with your own printer, do a few test plots, and figure out exactly what the right settings are. The nice thing is that once you get those settings correct, over here we have Save and Save As buttons. And so you can save this page setup and give it a name. You can see right now that my name is just default. But if I went in and made a bunch of settings in here, click Save As, I could give it some other name. And then the next time I plot, I can just use those settings with one click. The default behavior here is to zoom the page to fit the screen. Now, in my case, that might be appropriate because I've got an E-size sheet and I'm printing to a letter-size piece of paper. So if I were to not do that, I would only get a small corner of the sheet. So if I want the sheet to fit on the 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, then I want to do Fit to Page. Otherwise, you choose Zoom and you choose 100%. If you want to do a half size, you make it 50%. You have a couple different ways to process lines. Vector processing, which it says here is faster. Raster processing sometimes gives you better results when you have transparency and shading and other things like that. But for vector graphics, it's probably better to use vector processing. You can control the quality from a couple different choices there, from high to low to presentation. And you can tell it what to do with any colors you may have. So if you have colored lines in your project, you can actually force them to black lines. Now, there's a few other settings down here which are kind of handy. If you've got halftone used in any of your views, like if you think of that furniture plan that we did in the movie on views and view settings, sometimes halftone doesn't print so well in certain plotters. You can actually ask the plotter to replace that with thin lines and get a slightly better result. This is actually a new feature. It hasn't been there in very long. We can tell it to automatically hide crop boundaries and scope boxes and any unreferenced view tags. So if you've got a section head or an elevation head in your view that hasn't gone on a sheet yet, instead of just showing an empty section head, those will just get hidden. We can hide work and reference planes. And if you want, if you're going to print in color, you can actually plot all your view references in blue. So that's a summary of all the different settings. Again, we can do Save As if we want to keep those settings for another time. We click OK. And then if I went ahead and clicked OK, it would actually make the plot. I'm going to just close in my case because I don't actually want to generate any paper right now, but that's the process you would follow to go ahead and click print.